people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
De la noche, Stephanie Piñeiro.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It's official. They made it official. Sky Nicholson versus Raven Chapman is a go for the undercard of Beterbiev versus Bivol. Sky Nicholson herself took to her social media and stated, "Fight card of the year? Time to go 12-0 on October 12th on the biggest of world stages. A fight the fans have been waiting for on a night to be remembered. Riyadh season is heating up. This is a historical moment for women in sport, women in boxing. Two undefeated fighters in Sky Nicholson and Raven Chapman. Boxing in that region of the world where the ideals are different to what you see in the West. It's a historical moment. It's a step forward. We've talked about the fight, the actual fight. We've talked about that plenty.
I literally made a video about it yesterday.
A few thoughts. Many were expecting Tiaria Brown to be Sky Nicholson's next opponent. Not Raven. They were expecting Tiaria. I would have been okay with either fight, Tiaria or Raven.
Either fight works for me.
And Tiaria's not going anywhere. She'll still be there for the winner, whoever wins the fight. Stylistically, I actually think the Raven Chapman fight is the more difficult fight for Sky than the Brown fight. The Chapman fight,
Pressure fighter versus pure boxer, you know how it goes.
I suppose that Tiaria will have to find something else to do and someone else to fight for what remains of this year. This is going down in October. If she wants the winner, she won't get access to them until the following year.
She's wanted to fight Sky Nicholson for a long time.
Sky's done a very good job of promoting herself, keeping her name and keeping her face out there. Matchroom has done a good job with this fighter. Sky Nicholson is the second most recognizable featherweight, second only to the queen of this division, Amandia Serrano, who's upstairs at 140 with bigger fish to fry. In her absence from this division, and the absence of Sky's friend, Alicia Baumgartner, who's been out for over a year.
Undisputed super featherweight champion.
If it feels like things have kind of cooled off in women's boxing, it's because many of the familiar faces have been otherwise preoccupied. As stated, Alicia Baumgartner hasn't fought in over a year. Taylor Serrano too. That's not till the end of this year, close to it.
Savannah Marshall went to mixed martial arts.
Clarissa Shields fought a girl, but nobody knew the girl, so it wasn't a big fight, didn't get that much attention.
Ebony Bridges, one of the more familiar faces in the sport, she hasn't fought the entirety of this year. She hasn't fought since last year when she lost her IBF title. So if there's a feeling like things kind of cooled off, it's because many of the fighters that people are familiar with, they haven't really been around as much.
Enter Sky Nicholson, who I think has done a very good job of just keeping her name and keeping her face out there.
You guys know me. I'm not a fan of pure boxers.
But I couldn't help but notice the positive reaction people had to Sky Nicholson's performance on the undercard of Ennis versus Evanesian. Sky's fight with Diana Vargas, the movement, the slickness, the counters. There were a lot of people that actually liked what they saw.
Positive reaction on foreign soil.
You know, she had a buzz coming out of the amateurs, and she could have based herself out of her native Australia, but as it stands, she's fought in America, she's fought in the United Kingdom, now she's fighting in Saudi. She's doing a fantastic job of meeting these challenges and helping to contribute to the sport, grow it in her own way. So even if I'm not a big fan of how she fights, there is that to admire about young Sky Nicholson, about this young fighter.
She's starting to grow on me.
People were starting to wonder, The difference in ideologies that you see in Saudi versus what you see in the West, and Turkey's continued involvement in the sport, would he invest in a women's boxing match and in women's boxing? And it appears he has. People noticed that there weren't any women's bouts in any of the Riyadh season shows that he did. They were starting to wonder whether or not he would be okay with doing that.
He's done it.
Very exciting times, and there is more to come. I think due to familiarity and name value, Sky Nicholson will go into this fight as the betting favorite. Not necessarily based on her boxing, not necessarily based on the styles, but because more people know her.
Their quality of competition is close to even. Close to even. I'll go as far as saying that I think Raven has fought one or two better fighters than Sky has fought.
Sky fought a former champion in Sarah Mahfoud. Raven Chapman fought a former champion in Jorgelina Guanini.
Sky fought an unbeaten fighter in Tania Alvarez. Raven Chapman fought an unbeaten fighter in Lila Furtado.
This is a good even fight. I think it hurts Sky a little more if she loses than it would hurt Raven because Sky's the reigning champion. She's the one with the WBC title. If Raven were to lose, she could always regroup, go for another belt.
Well, you could say the same thing about Sky.
I could, but Sky's the champion going in. She's the one that has that to lose. So I think it would hurt her a little more. We'll talk more about the fight as the fight date approaches. Evaluating the show, there are a lot of fingers in this pie. There's at least one fighter from Top Rank, Artur Beterbiev, one fighter from Queensbury, Raven Chapman.
Though it is mostly a matchroom and boxer affair when you look at the rest of the card, who has more fighters on it.
Matchroom has Dimitri Bivol in the main event, Joe Cordina on the undercard, Cruiserweight champion, Jai Opataya, featherweight champion, Sky Nicholson.
Boxers got a lot of bodies on the show too.
Chris Eubank Jr. is a boxer fighter. He just signed to them. Frazier Clark, he's with Boxer. Ben Whitaker, he's with Boxer.
Boxers got a lot of bodies on the show.
The show itself seems primarily geared towards a British audience. I would say a British audience more so than an American one, because there isn't much for the Americans on here outside of Shakur Stevenson's fight with Joe Cordina that really isn't a mouth-watering fight.
I like the card, don't get me wrong. I like it, but I don't know that most Americans are going to be all that enthused because there are not that many American fighters on the card.
Just one. It very much is an international card. 2 Russians in the main event, 1 American, couple of Brits,
2 Australians.
So you see that Cruiserweight champion, 2-time Cruiserweight champion Jai Opataya is going to be fighting Jack Macy. I think when they were putting this card together, it was their intention to have a unification match on there. A few weeks ago, we saw Jai Opataya talking about an offer that was made to Chris Billum Smith, this division's WBO champion. I'd wager that if Chris would have took the offer, that would have been the fight. Jai Opataya versus Chris Billum Smith for the IBF and WBO titles.
I saw Chris Billum Smith say something about not being able to get ready on time. That when they fight, it's going to be on his schedule, not theirs. Just something along those lines, and not being ready for October.
Do you believe that?
I believe that if it were someone else, if it were someone other than Jai Opataya, then Chris would have been ready. He would have been more than ready. But for that particular fight, I don't really think he wants that fight, and I don't think his team want that fight for him, even for the money that it offers.
You can use the time frame as an excuse all you like. I don't really buy it. And I don't know that Chris is ever going to fight this guy, to be honest with you. I've got nothing against Chris Billum Smith. He seems like a nice kid and a good fighter in his own right, so I'm not trying to take the piss. But honestly, I don't think he wants that fight. I think he would prefer to unify with someone else. The winner of Mikhailian versus Rositsky, or maybe Zerto Ramirez. I think he would prefer to unify with them than trying to unify with Jai. Jai is the most dangerous fight at Cruiserweight for any contender and any champion, and I don't think they want it.
Got Olympian and unbeaten up-and-comer Ben Whitaker opposite the ring, Liam Cameron. A chance for young Ben to show out, show up, show his shit on a big stage in Saudi.
Ben Whitaker has amassed some notoriety already at this early stage in his career for being a showman, the constant showboating. I don't like it as much as some others because these are developmental fights after all. These fights are intended to allow the fighter to develop, and if you're just horsing around, you're just playing around, is that what you're really doing? Are you really developing?
Or taking advantage of opponents you know aren't on your level and in some ways making fun of them, making fools of them.
Because you can do that with them, and everybody knows that you can do that with them.
I see the good and the bad.
In this era where everybody's trying to go viral as quickly as possible, Ben has done a good job of drawing attention to himself.
Which is what you want in this racket. You do want people to pay attention. But the hardcore boxing fan that watches a lot of boxing, I don't think any of them are impressed that Ben is clowning these guys they're putting him in there with, because these are bring-along fights, bring-along opponents.
We expect you to win, so stop playing with your food and get rid of these guys. That's what people want. We also see Chris Eubank Jr. He's going to be facing Kamil Zeremeta. You may be familiar with that name. That's the same Kamil Zeremeta that Gennady Golovkin fought 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was. This is going to be his first fight since having inked a pact with Boxer. He hasn't fought in a year or over a year.
So they've decided to mitigate the risks and put him in there with Kamil Zeremeta.
One of the highlight fights on the card, Wortley versus Clark 2. Saw the first one. It was amazing. It lived up to my expectations. 2 highlight fights on the undercard are Wortley versus Clark and Nicholson versus Chapman that I just mentioned, that I just talked about. Those are the 2 fights on the undercard I like the most.
I love those 2 fights.
In terms of value for money, I think the value in this show will be lost on the American audience because it's more of an international show. It doesn't actually cater to an American audience more than, say, a British one.
So they may see the value in getting Ben Whitaker, Chris Eubank, Wortley versus Clark 2 on the same show as Beterbiev versus Bivol,
with a side order of Nicholson versus Chapman and Jayo Pataya versus Jack Mason.
an appetizer.
They haven't said it yet, and if they have, I haven't seen it, but I'm pretty sure this is going to be a pay-per-view in the UK. I'm pretty sure.
I don't know about America.
But I definitely get the sense this is going to be a pay-per-view in the UK. So as a pay-per-view, is it worth the money? And I would say yes. Beterbiev versus Bivol by itself justifies the cost. When you tack on the rematch between Fraser Clark and Fabio Wortley.
Okay, that's value for money. With the added extras, you get to see Ben Whitaker, you get to see Chris Eubank, Jayo Pataya. I'd say yes. That's value for money.
Would have been nice if Chris Billum Smith would have accepted the offer. Then you would have got a unification match.
You're getting undisputed in the main event. If you would have got a Cruiserweight unification match as an added extra, that would have been something.
But the card as it is looks to me like value for money. In a British boxing scene, for a British audience, yes, that's value for money. For an American audience, I'm not sure it would be wise to build this as a pay-per-view. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, it'd be nice. It would be a breath of fresh air if you could get a card like this as part of the regular schedule.
A break from all these box office fights having to pay per view because there are already so many. There have already been a lot of them, and there are more to come.
There's still more coming.
Some cards and some main events, I understand when they're pay-per-views, but I'm not sure it would be wise to build this as a pay-per-view in America.
Bill it as a regular fight here.
Evaluating the main event, a fight I've been waiting for something like at least 4, maybe 5 years now. Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol, both orthodox fighters. Artur's a bit more up there in age. He's 39, whereas Dmitry's 33. Artur sports professional record of 20 wins with no losses, no draws, 20 knockouts.
Unblemished record.
He's knocked out 100% of whoever they decided to put in front of him, whether they were a contender or a champion. Dmitry Bivol, not as high a knockout percentage, but still an unblemished record, sporting a professional record of 23 wins with no losses, no draws.
12 knockouts.
Unblemished record.
Battle of the unbeatens. A battle of the unbeaten fighters, unbeaten champions, years in the making. And believe you me, we wouldn't be getting this if it weren't for Turkey. Left to its own devices, boxing could not make this fight.
Or it didn't want to. Not bad enough. The real issue has always been that 2 Russian nationals, even 2 very good ones like Artur and Dmitry, they don't have that big a following here in America or in the United Kingdom, so to get them the kind of money they would want for a fight like this,
It would have been hard.
over a year ago they tried, but they just couldn't make the numbers work. They couldn't work it out. Enter His Excellency, enter Turkey Al-Sheikh, and the strategic placement of a few matchroom fighters, a few boxer fighters, a few British fighters to spruce up the card for a British audience, and you may yet be able to make it happen. And they have all we have to do is wait now. Fighters, all they have to do is fight.
And so Dmitry Bivol, reigning WBA champion, he's seen action 2 times in the last 12 months. He fought once in December against Lyndon Arthur, then again earlier this year in June against Malik Zinad.
Malik Zinad was actually a late replacement. Initially, it was supposed to be Artur, but Artur, injury-prone Artur, once again, suffered an injury. They said it was a torn meniscus.
That delayed the fight.
So it ended up getting moved to October. Though in spite of that, in spite of the injury, Artur actually has seen action in the last 12 months. He was in action earlier this year against Callum Smith.
Who he knocked out in 7 rounds.
7th round TKO stoppage.
Can he do that to Dmitry?
I haven't seen the betting lines yet, but I would imagine the way it looks, it's got to be even money or close to even money. I did a poll just the other day. Some have Dmitry Bivol as an ever so slight favorite going in because he is the younger, fresher fighter who is nowhere near as injury prone as Artur. As devastating as he is in the ring, outside of it, he's often injured, and it's hampered his career, hampered his schedule, stifled it.
He's 39 years old.
Now, he didn't look 39 years old, beating Callum Smith from pillar to post, but Callum Smith is no Dmitry Bivol. Dmitry has some of the best defense, if not the best defense, in the light heavyweight division. So where a guy like Callum Smith or a guy like Anthony Yard might not be that hard to find in the ring, Dmitry is a different gravy.
It's a different kettle of fish.
I like Dmitry Bivol to win by the slightest of margins. I like Dmitry Bivol to perhaps win a points decision, though he really has to make it work. He has to make it all come together. We've seen 2 different versions of Dmitry, depending on who he's fighting. An economic, defensively minded fighter.
Usually that's how he fights.
Other times he actually hits the gas, like he did with Zurdo Ramirez, like he did more recently with Lyndon Arthur and Malik Zinad, who he stopped.
Who he knocked out.
That was Dmitry Bivol's first knockout win in about 6 years. Before that, he hadn't really knocked anybody out since Sullivan Barrera way back there in 2018. Needless to say that Dmitry is not known for power. He's not known as a knockout merchant like Artur. What he brings to the table,
Then how does he win?
footwork, movement, speed, and quick counters, alternating, finding that happy medium between being the aggressor and being the defender, as you can't be just one against Artur. Too much time on the inside, you're going to get battered. You're going to get outgunned. Too much time on the outside, you're going to get found out. You're going to get outworked. You have to find a happy medium.
You have to do a bit of both.
The avenue of opportunity I see for Dmitry against Artur is that he can interrupt him. Interrupt his forward momentum with quick counters by beating him to the punch.
Like what he did to Zurdo?
Back him off, then step out of the pocket before he can counter, before he can bring something over. I think that's what he's going to try to do to Artur. But Artur, I think we all know, he's a better pressure guy than Zurdo.
He's better at everything than Zurdo. So he won't beat him as easily.
If he does beat him, I'm going with Dmitry Bivol in a fight where anything can happen.
We'll talk more about it as the fight date approaches.